Thank you. Wow, thank you. Okay, so how many people are going, how the heck do you follow that? Yeah, I was sitting there wondering the same thing myself. They asked me to talk a little about innovation and about 3D printing. And I thought, wow, I looked at the people I'm following and I said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to talk about 3D printing as a technology. I think what I'm going to do is talk about, honest to God, I didn't know what Mark's introductory comments were going to be, but I'm going to talk about technology that changes our lives. And 3D printing happens to be one of those. And we heard in the last talk a discussion about evolution. You heard words like evolution and like revolution. And all these things are really what's going on when you find a technology that changes your life. We heard about some amazing technologies there. So I'm going to frame 3D printing and additive manufacturing in the context of how it makes a difference. And I think that would have a better impact than talking about making key rings and doll heads. How about that? As you heard, I have a really strange background. I have a little experience in building companies, and so I'm the odd person out here in the sense that I have probably had more jobs than most people have had. You build them, sometimes they fail, most of the time they fail, and you just get up and do it again. My wife wishes there was an AA for entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, there isn't yet. About 6 years ago, I was sitting around thinking it was really a time for change for me. And I had the tremendous fortune of making a phone call, which I urge you all to remember, pick up the phone. You don't have to wait for someone to find you, you can find them. And I called a woman named Sue James, who's the head of Mechanical today, who was the founder of our biomedical engineering department. And I explained my story. Hey, there's this guy in his early 50s who wants to do biomedical engineering research, and she didn't laugh. In fact, we got to be talking about some of her innovations. And I saw, wow, there's a parallel here. There's an amazing kind of combination of thoughts about a love for technology and our passion for our technology with a thought of how does this make our lives better and how does it change things. So Sue had this idea of taking a simple substance that's in all of us, it's all over our bodies, and combining it with another substance that is very commonly used in many, many sciences called polyethylene. And by putting the two together, and they're like oil and water, by doing the chemistry to get those to work together, she developed a product called BioPoly. I bet everyone in this room knows someone with bad cartilage in their knees. And BioPoly was a product that was developed to help with articular cartilage problems. Today, this product is an actual commercial product helping people. It's going in knees in Europe with great success. And so not only was I tremendously inspired by the use of technology to change people, not simple stuff, to really change people's lives. And now Sue and in our lab, I work with Sue in this lab, we're off now working on putting those same kinds of materials and coatings on heart valves. It's going to be called CardioPoly. Lots of things that need to be made more slippery can be enhanced by this really interesting polymer. So, so we talked about change, and I'm going to talk about 3D printing, I promise. And it's really about how do these things affect lives. And I think, I thought it would be best to characterize this in some good examples. So, about, I think it was June last year, maybe you folks have read about this. A baby Kaiba appeared in the University of Michigan Medical School. The baby had a disease that caused one lung to collapse. She was born with the disease, she would have died. It just would not, the material wouldn't stay together. The trachea was not completely developed. The bronchioles were not completely developed. And on a simple 3D printer, the folks went down to their lab, simple meaning less than a $2,000 3D printer. We have 10 of them over there in the other building. They took the CAT scan data of the baby's good bronchiole, they mirrored it, they printed it in PLA, which is completely biodegradable. They installed it in this baby, and 6 months later, the baby is perfectly normal because the PLA degrades, disappears, just gave the baby a chance to do its own thing, and it worked. And it's a really interesting case of how this technology can be something you hear about all the time, but it really can make a difference in our lives. Another great example, this young man obviously has a disability, and he has a very, very dedicated father behind him, pounding away on the workbench, making a robotic hand. Now you might imagine if you don't have any digits at all, how do you get that thing to work? Well, it's kind of a complicated problem. With no training and no experience at all, he built RoboHand. RoboHand is now built for people all around the world, including this young man who just received his RoboHand last fall. He lives in Seattle, Washington, 5-year-old kid who can actually throw a ball and catch a ball with his 3D printed RoboHand. It changes lives. We did this project, we were partners on this project about 2 years ago. The Iraq war vets were coming back, and when there's massive tissue loss, it's really hard to reconstruct without enough bone there. So what they were doing is taking CAT scan data, we were putting it in the CAD system, and we were helping build these are pure titanium parts. Medical Modeling is a company right here local, Golden, Colorado, the world's leading supplier of medical parts for surgeons around the world. And they have 6 metal printers making 3D printed metal parts to go in people's bodies. That's changing lives, but this is probably the most amazing example. And believe it or not, it's already over 5 years old. These twins were obviously conjoined. You can just imagine the complexity of that surgery. So they went in and they took the data from CT data. They used colorizing techniques to map the difference between the vasculature and the bone. They even prepared an insertion window so that the surgeons could take the thing out the way it was supposed to be done. They could look inside at the vasculature. I wish the lights were lower because you can't really see, but this is amazingly complex vasculature. They planned the surgery. They had the difference between the nerves and the blood vessels, and they were able to then proceed with, what was that? Oh, it's called on-off. That's technology that affects our lives. There we go. There's a little zoom in on it. Extremely complex. And they actually had to figure out which belonged to which. The good news is, these babies went home. Perfectly normal. That's Andy Christensen, the president of Medical Modeling, by the way. He's a big part of that project. So, like I said, 3D printing is a technology. And as the prior speakers were saying, it's the way we use these technologies is what's really, really important. So as you're crafting your career, we can all get excited about the next Droid phone. It can affect your life, but it's not going to change your life. These kinds of technologies really can have a big, big difference. And so, yes, in my introduction, I discussed this idea to Product Lab. Again, being a serial entrepreneur, I suppose, is what they call me. About 2 years ago, I had yet another student come to me with a really cool idea. And I imagined that they would need hundreds of hours in a shop to get even close to that idea. And my previous background was all in 3D technology, and I know the field very, very well, and I said, wow, why don't I go find a 3D printer for this person to use? Nowhere. And so I said, why don't we have a laboratory that the whole community can come visit, and we'll raise money from all kinds of other sources, and we'll buy and build the 3D printers. We build them all ourselves now. And we'd fill this lab with them, and we invite anyone who wants to use it to come learn about 3D printing, come make parts, come do whatever your dream is. Yes, I see cell phone cases, I see all kinds of crazy things, but the interesting thing is I see a ton of innovative people. We have a guy developing, he owns the patents to a plastic fabric that was developed by Samsonite for 10 years. They did not bring it to market. He bought those patents and he's doing it in our lab right now. It's an unbelievable thing. It feels like leather. We are building the helmet to the exoskeletal project that you talked about earlier. Fascinating project. We spend time in conference calls with Brazil and Paris and UC Davis and Duke building this project for the World Cup. We get scanned data of the patient's heads with an EEG cap on them. We create 3D printed objects. A lot of complications. How do you make a 3D printed part, ship it to Brazil? They apply the electrodes, they ship it to Paris. Then they put it on the patient's head and they have to be able to move all the electrodes. Well, so we're designing electrode mounts in this helmet that can actually be moved and reinstalled. And it's a really complicated problem. Again, we just love touching lives, and that's what makes it the most important in the end. We're a community access facility. You do whatever you want in the facility. You come and get trained. We're right over in the engineering building in the basement. We also host a printer in the library if you're afraid of the engineering building. Bringing it home. This is a project the company Orthopets in Denver builds. This is a full-scale model of a black lab leg. They built 4 of them. All the tendons and ligaments are anatomically accurate, and they're on snaps. So you can pop one off and see what happens if that ligament is gone. Very, very interesting. I have it in my office. I didn't want to bring it because it's kind of bulky, but and I don't want to hurt it. But that costs about $30 or $40 worth of plastic and printing. And it's a fabulous device built by, as I said, a commercial company. This is a jig used to do a bone surgery on the humerus. If you have a large dog, you may see one of these someday, or you'll see the effect of this someday. And one of the orthopedic surgeons needed this to be built. I think it was 80 cents. He came over and said, I'd like it like this, and he built the thing and printed it and went back and uses it. This is a very interesting study. I got the pictures from one of our students, a PhD student in our department. He's working on, one of the problems with heart valves is that the blood clots in a heart valve over time. And so anything you can do to make it more slippery, or if you understand much about engineering and turbulence, to create a slipperier boundary so you don't damage those red blood cells as they're coming through is a good thing. So Marcio is spending a lot of time over the last few years building little micro geometries on heart valves. These are the size of the end of your thumb, by the way. And there is 3D printed parts off of one of our devices. It prints down to 25 microns, and he can print. You can't see them on here, but we'll have this presentation available for people. All the little geometries in there so he can actually test them in his tester device. Again, the technology isn't the key. It's how you go use it. Here's another interesting heart valve project. This is an actual piece of pericardium sewn into a stented ring. The rings are expensive. So I called up Andy at Medical Modeling and said, hey, Andy, can you make me a stent to make heart valves? And that came right off of his titanium 3D printer. Saves a lot of money, and it's exactly the way that folks wanted it to are making these heart valves. These are some interesting projects. I'll just mention, this is a molecule you can't really see. This is a virus, that's dengue fever. This is a very interesting box of viruses. A really great way to understand the epitope interactions and the virus-antibody combinations is to build a lot of them. They built 405 antibody-virus pairs as teaching aids. And it's really effective. And the students came over and built them all, and they know a lot about viruses and antibodies now by building them and holding them and seeing how they fit together. And Dr. Ray Whalen is a neurobiologist over in the vet school. This is the cat skull on the left. He does a lot of work in cat neurosurgeries and neurobiology, and this is the 3D printed version. It is accurate to 25 microns. It's exactly accurate. Well, nothing's quite exact, is it? So the other thing they asked me to talk about was, how you meander a career that takes you in so many places. And I thought what I'd like to leave you with were some thoughts about common patterns that I've seen over 30 years of walking in and out different doors. You know, in the end, somebody already mentioned the word passion. You have to remember that you're going to do this day after day after day. I wouldn't think that anything is more important than loving what you do or doing something else. I'm a great example. The word change comes up a lot. You know, you just decide to do something else and be willing to do the work to go do it. The other thing that comes to mind is willingness to be part of the diversity and honor it. Everybody thinks they have the best idea. The really best ideas come when you can make 2 + 2 = 6 or more by sitting in a room with people who you may even disagree with and just listening to them and finding out that they had some really cool ideas. And realizing that you, as part of that contribution process, builds a group of people whose ideas together become an even greater idea. And the places I've seen the most companies fail are the places where people forget to listen to people they may not have wanted to listen to. I sit in the coffee shop over there listening to people tell me new business ideas, and can always tell when they ask me to listen, to talk to them for a while, and then they do all the talking about how great their idea is, they don't really want to listen to the other person's idea. So remember, that is a really, really important part of, you're probably not right all the time, I'm guessing. And I think the next thing is to honor change. A lot of people fear what's going to come. If you think you can plan serendipity, forget about it. You have to hope, and you have to work hard, and then you have to be, I always have this comment, I always have my dance shoes on. Because you don't know as much as you think you know, and when the wind blows a different way tomorrow, if you're not willing to respond differently, you're not going to have a business anymore. So you have to really be prepared to really make a really quick reaction a lot of times. You plan yourself around how you can react. And be prepared to accept that change. A lot of people are very uncomfortable about, I'm going to do something different tomorrow. I know this was a great idea, but I'm going to bend it a little because we won't survive if I don't. And last thing I would say is never, ever, ever look back, except to learn from the mistakes you made and to learn from the things that worked. Okay, I lied. The last thing I'll say is always understand and don't ever forget the caveat I just told you. Thank you.